Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with Inside the U. Just finished up at day 3 of the workouts here at the NFL Scouting Combine right outside Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Today I want to get into, first off, with the workouts. Quarterback Carson Beck was out here, as well as wide receiver CJ Daniels. And then a little bit later I'll talk about the interview session in the morning with the offensive linemen, Mauigoa, Markeel Bell, and Inez Cooper. First off with Carson Beck, good to see him out here. He was throwing, and everybody knew when he was throwing because the crowd was booing him every time he threw it. It was pretty lame, to be honest, hearing this at the Combine, but it is what it is. You know, I think Carson did a pretty good job for the most part throughout the day. You know, I thought he did a good job throwing accurate passes. I thought he did a good job, you know, in the individual workout with the quarterbacks, doing his drills on his own. And then when they got with the wide receivers, they run through a lot of drills and routes with the wide receivers. Carson did a good job for the most part on those. I thought he was much better in the intermediate passes there. You know, sometimes on the deep balls, just incompletions, whether it was just a straight kind of a go route essentially, but I thought he was better when he did play action passes. Which isn't a surprise, because if you followed Carson, not just at Miami, but throughout his career, he's been pretty good at play action passes. And I think whatever team he goes to, I think that would be something that he'd be able to, you know, kind of have in his pocket in terms of the offense and things that he would be good at. So, you know, again, it was just good to see Carson out here. He spoke yesterday. Definitely check out the channel to see what he had to say about his interviews. And he's been saying, you know, that he's enjoyed the interview process with teams and them asking questions. He said, really, you kind of go into a room with about 20 personnel and just don't know what the real feedback is. But, you know, Carson's a guy that's played a lot, you know, and also too today, he measured in. You know, when the guys work out, they also do their official measurements. And Carson checked in at 6'4.5", 233 pounds, and they actually put a graphic up during the Combine up on the scoreboard that, you know, very comparable measurables to Carson Palmer, you know, who checked in at 6'5", 232. So that just kind of shows you, because we all remember Carson as a quarterback, Carson Palmer, and I think that just shows the size with Carson Beck. And I think, as you know, I understand, you know, there's this real battle for that number 3. Who's going to be that third quarterback taken, or can Carson do something, you know, to really elevate himself, you know, with these interviews and kind of how he handles himself. But I think he's in a good position. I believe that he can be that third quarterback. I thought today, again, a couple incompletions, a few incompletions, but it is what it is. There were other guys throwing incompletions. I just think the size and the experience, he's won a lot of games as well. I think those things are going to play a big factor into him, and I think he's going to be a guy that does well in the interviews. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. Actually, I think you could see him. I see him as that kind of third best quarterback in this draft class. So we'll see how it shakes out, but a good day overall for Carson. Just disappointing kind of to hear all the boos, but there were some matchups, some pairings that was fun, you know, but while they're stretching and going through it, at the beginning, you know, he was there with CJ Daniels. I even saw them do their handshake. They got to do that before it all started, and when it wrapped up, you know, they did it too. Just think about their connection that they had this year. But the way it was working, where the wide receivers would kind of rotate in a little over 20 receivers there, and then a quarterback not nearly as many. So sometimes, you know, most of the time Carson's not throwing to CJ, but there were a few times where it just kind of worked out in the lines that he was actually able to throw passes to him. And CJ, you know, with him today, didn't go through the testing. He's planning on doing that pro day. Again, just a reminder, Miami's pro day is going to be March 23rd, and this is very common with what we've seen all week with guys not doing their testing here. But they have been doing, some of them have been doing some position drill stuff, and that's what CJ did. You know, I thought CJ did pretty good on the position drills. There wasn't anything alarming with him or anything that he really got tripped up with. You know, there was one where a deep pass, it would have been nice if it was a better pass, he could have came down with it. But overall, I thought CJ did a good job of, you know, just kind of catching the passes that were thrown to him. I thought in the gauntlet drill, the wide receivers do it twice, kind of an up and back. I thought he did a pretty good job. He did drop one, but for the most part, I thought he did a pretty good job of kind of just running his route, very fluid runner. And then, you know, he's a guy that catches passes. So he checked in at 6'2", 202 pounds today on his official measurements. So going back to the offensive line, interviews with reporters today, starting with Mauigoa. He's looking to be a top 10 pick. And I thought this was very interesting. People were asking him, reporters were asking him about, you know, have teams talk to him about guard, you know, at the NFL level. He's been a right tackle at Miami all 3 years as a starter there. And, you know, it's interesting hearing the guard talk come up again, because I thought, when I remember watching him in high school, I thought he would be an elite guard prospect, although certainly he could play tackle at a high level. And he said with playing guard at the next level, he's certainly willing to do that. And he said there's 5 spots on the offensive line, and to him, he's going to be there to take one of them, and that's his mentality. And I thought that's good, you know, to show that versatility. He said he's had formal meetings, and people ask about certain teams, but he did say he had formal meetings with the Browns, who picked 6th, the Kansas City Chiefs, who picked 9th, the Bengals at 10, and then the Dolphins at 11. And certainly he had good things to say about the Dolphins. The thought of staying in Miami once again for his pro career to start off, he's excited about that. But I do want to pass this along. It's always interesting to find out about draft prospects, where they're training. And Francis said, when I asked him about that, he's been training in Knoxville, Tennessee, with former Miami offensive lineman, a former NFL vet of 10 years, and John Feliciano. And I remember watching John in high school, Mongo, playing both sides of the ball, real tough player, played in the NFL for a long time, as I mentioned, at the guard spot. So he's been working, you know, Francis has been working with John there, training there right now, and I think that's been a good fit. So that's good to hear. But overall, you know, I just thought Francis did a good job carrying himself in the interview, kind of passing those notes along. He was asked right out of the gate if he was going to run the 40, or what he could run the 40 in, and he said he thinks he could run a 4.9. And just double checked with him, he's not planning on running that tomorrow, but just wanted to pass that along. But certainly good to hear what Francis had to say in his interviews. And then with Markeel Bell, he said that he has had formal meetings with the Denver Broncos, Minnesota Vikings, and Cleveland Browns, and he's been doing his training in Texas. And it's good seeing Markeel again after seeing him at the Senior Bowl, and he's looking forward to going through drills and workouts on Sunday as well, on that 4th and final day. Today was the final day of the combine interviews, and tomorrow will be the final day here with the workouts. And then with Inez Cooper, again, another offensive lineman leaving the state. He actually went back home to Alabama, and that's where he's been training. He did say he had a formal interview with the New York Jets, and he's not planning on doing the testing tomorrow, but he did say he will be doing the drills. Looking forward to doing that. And I asked him, you know, Jackson Cantwell, you know, just his impressions of him. And Inez said that he actually did a camp with him before, but he said he's a guy just watching his reps, and these early reps as the team got ready for their playoff run. Just said Jackson came in and kept his head down, worked hard, asked questions, thinks he has a bright future. And then also, too, I asked him who he thinks will be the leader of the offensive line next year. All these guys are gone. These 3 linemen, James Brockemeyer is gone as well. So who's going to be the leader? And, you know, he said Matthew McCoy. That was the name that he said. So looking forward to seeing how Matt does during spring ball. Again, kind of guard tackle combo, depending on what they want to do. Same way with Sampson, you know, if they want to go guard tackle there as well. But that is going to wrap everything up for me here, day 3. Definitely appreciate everybody for tuning in the comments. But I do want to give a quick shout out to a few people. Real quick, yesterday, it was great. A fan came up to me after watching my video, MacArthur, shout out to you. Appreciate you. Great talk, and definitely just advice as you can do what you want to put your mind to. Looking forward to seeing how you progress. And then also, too, shout out to 305 Sports, the twins, Michael Euro, Anthony Euro. Michael helped me out on a video yesterday, so shout out to them. If you're not following them, definitely do that, because they put out great work, certainly covering South Florida sports as best as possible. But thanks again for watching. Have a good rest of the day, and take care.